Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolowski, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
Welcome today. Well, I am wearing my yellow ribbon for this 4th of July week today. Thanks for allowing me to do this. Betty Ritter Boutique in the plaza at Preston Center in Dallas, who's having a great sale, by the way. Today, I have a really interesting guest and story that I was taken by. And I'll tell you what happened. I met this gentleman today, retired Colonel Don Taylor, and we got to talking about his background, and one thing led to another. And let me just introduce the aspects of the show today that we're going to be talking about. One thing he said early on was, he said, you know, Valerie's in healthcare now and doing a lot of advising and consulting and teaching and speaking based on his experiences in a little remote place in Iraq, Baghdad, where he commanded a hospital unit there, and I'll tell you about it in a moment. But what he said that fascinated me was, he said, healthcare found me, and then it became a calling. And that's what started our relationship to have Don on the show today. So I want to welcome you, retired Colonel Don Taylor, for being on this show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and helping me share the stories about doing it right.
Thank you. And this is the first time you've been on a show like this.
It is. First time.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, a little nervous.
And now you're out there doing speaking engagements all over the country. Isn't that interesting?
I hope so, and I love it. I love it.
This is no different, but you're just talking to people you can't see. So there you go.
That's correct. Thank you.
Listeners, let me just mention something to you. Watch the comment section, and please make a lot of comments. Ask questions, because as I tell you this story, I think you're going to want to. So here it is. Retired Colonel Don Taylor was tapped on the shoulder to command a much-needed trauma center in Baghdad, Iraq, at the height of the Iraqi war. With a cadre of military doctors and nurses, Don took the reins to design and command this hospital that at one point cared for ABC, remember this, anchor Bob Woodruff, who was almost fatally injured, and his cameraman, Doug Vogt. So it happened in 2006, Don. I understand that a roadside bomb exploded very close to the vehicle where Bob Woodruff and Doug Vogt were riding, carrying on about all the anchor things that our wonderful people do over there in the media. And this IED exploded. They were both seriously injured. They both had shrapnel wounds to the head. They were rushed by helicopter to this small combat hospital that you commanded. And so tell us about when you heard this was coming. What were you thinking and feeling as the commander of this little hospital where they were landing soon?
Well, it was interesting, and thank you for the question. It was a Sunday morning, and as I start in some of my keynotes, I start with the kind of ironies of the space. I had just left morning service in the chapel, and I always talk about how ironic it is that I'm going to a church service in the middle of a combat zone, wearing a 9mm handgun, listening to hymns that I knew as a child. And I said the irony of that always kind of frustrated, kind of never quite resonated with me. But anyway, as I had gone back in the Sunday morning routine, which was normally a sort of a calm day for us, we were getting mortared on the average about 3 times a day. But Sundays they tended to relax, and we could catch up with things. Well, I got a call that it was time I needed to be in. Something was happening. And so, sure enough, I jumped in the vehicle, and when I arrived at the hospital, it was really kind of preparing for what I thought was going to be a mass casualty event. But it was very apparent that all of a sudden we had some challenges. I was told that in the tent right next to me, we were still in canvas tents at this time, doing, frankly, the busiest trauma center in the world, and still in canvas tents. And we were, and I was told that the ABC News production team was in the tent and was on a satellite link back to the ABC News president and Bob Woodruff's wife, and that he would be arriving shortly. So I knew then that this was going to be a different day just because of the notoriety of him. But I took things in hand, and the first thing I did was confiscate all cameras.
Oh, really?
I confiscated all cameras,
Why?
video cameras, news media,
Yeah.
to protect his privacy.
Good for you.
There had been a few incidents here and there, but my team was, we had enough trust that they trusted me and they knew that I did it for a reason. And so you'll never find any images at that time from his time there, which was very brief, during this long journey of recovery and rehabilitation, which continues today probably.
But he was unconscious
He was.
for, what, 36 days?
I think that was the duration. He was with us a very short period of time, for a number of hours, but the stabilization, initial surgery, the neurosurgeons did work with him there for about 3 hours. And because of the technology and the advancements of Air Force medicine, we were able to fly him that evening to Germany.
My goodness.
After midnight. It was exactly what we had all trained and prepared for decades of our lives.
And it was happening real time.
Real time, with a lot of interest internationally as well.
And his cameraman was right
there the whole time.
So you were working on both.
At the same time, as well as a young Marine who had been injured and had a lower back injury in a Humvee rollover, and the neurosurgeons were caring for him at the same time they were caring for Bob Woodruff in a different OR.
What was it like to be at this place where, it was in place when you first came, you commanded it, but to think about just the surroundings. I mean, there was no Lowe's, there was no Home Depot.
Correct.
It wasn't really a clean outside surroundings. You were there how long, and what was it like?
I was there just a little short of 6 months. Part of my team was there 4. Some of the team was there a year, and it varied by service. We were. It was really kind of magical the way it happens, because we all are prepared independently across the nation and across the service. It's a testament to standardization of processes and principles and organizational discipline, as I call it, because we arrived from 50 different locations, and we were able to coalesce as a single team in less than a day to provide this kind of service and quality of care that actually saved lives. Our survival rate was over 98.5%.
My goodness,
in the
Don,
middle of
that's
a combat
amazing.
zone.
How many people were working there together that coalesced?
About 400. At any one time, we varied based upon needs and processes.
And how big was this hospital?
Oh, let me see. We were about 43,000 square feet, I think, of canvas tents with a helipad that could handle 4. And it was over a campus that was probably the size of about 4 football fields, where we had logistics and infrastructure support and blast barriers and all kinds of other things, because we were right near. Again, we were right near the edge of the perimeter of the base, and so we were exposed to some risk at times. But we all did what we needed to do.
Well, you just do, don't you?
You do.
But were you personally ever scared?
It's funny you should ask the question. We all deal with fear a different way. In leaving, I was anxious, uncertain, and you don't know what you're going into. And I haven't spoken to this publicly, but somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, I was listening to the theme song from the movie Pearl Harbor. And in the middle of that song, I had this warmth come over me that I said, you know what? If I never come home, I'm good. I've done all I needed to do. And it's sort of just it warms you.
Peace.
And I had this peace, and I never lost that. I never lost it. I felt then I had to step up. I had some folks, get ill. I had some folks that went through depression. I had some folks that were anxious. Some were very fearful, and we watched for them all. We were a team. We took care of each other during that time. And there were some times that it was at risk, but most of the time we knew what our job was. We were here to take care of these kids that looked to us to save their lives. That's what it was about.
Thank you for sharing that story on
Thank
this
you.
show. That means a lot. Listeners, I want you to be thinking about questions you might have. This is an interesting story behind the scenes that we don't often get. We see the media and we hear the stories later, but here's a man that lived it. When you were asked to command this, tapped on the shoulder, as you told me, why were you tapped on the shoulder?
Because I asked for it.
Oh, you did?
I wanted to do this.
Really?
Yeah, this in my mind, in Air Force medicine was the best job they could offer. And I was unique that it had always been commanded by physicians, and I was the only non-physician to command that particular facility. Partly because of experience, partly because of advocacy, some great men who thought and knew me and
Trusted you?
and trusted me to do this well. And so I arrived with a little bit different mindset, not as a non-physician, but more as a leader. And that resonated with the team. It resonated with the leadership there and the way I approached what we did. Because it was more about coalescing as a team. My job was to take care of the team, challenge them with safety. I wanted them to renew themselves spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially, whatever they did, but choose one, but go home better than you arrived. Take this time to renew yourself. Yes, you're going to see crazy, really difficult things. You're going to see things you'll never forget. But the best immunization to that is to be focused on your self-renewal. It worked for a number of us, and to this day, a lot of those team members see things as fondly during that time. And it was part of my message to them. Part of the leadership was helping them help themselves with their fears, with their emotional kind of challenges during this time. Not to mention our mission, which was not very easy. These young people, men and women, would arrive, and you'd look down and you'd see your kid, you'd see your brother or sister.
Oh, my goodness, yes,
And-
I can imagine.
And they would look up, and I told the team, and I told the team, I said, when they look up to you during that moment, you're the most important person they've ever met in their life.
Yes.
I need you to be worthy of that. And to be worthy of that, you have to have your head clear. You have to be prepared. You have to be well rested. You also have to be focused on that exact moment. They deserve that. So that was what I kept resonating with them. I couldn't do it. I didn't have those skills, those clinical skills, but I was right there with them, helping them and supporting them. Sometimes it was getting Gatorade, or sometimes it was mopping a bloody floor. But I did what I needed to do to make sure that they did what they could do well.
Don, what's striking me is that you said on the plane you had this warmth come over you, and I said that meant peace, I'm sure. There is no doubt that you're doing what you're doing today because you were given that opportunity. So bring us up to speed now. How have you used all of that wealth of experience and depth of experience to now do what you're doing, and tell us what you're doing?
Well, it's funny, when you leave something that emotionally, it's hard to describe. Something that's challenged you from the very depths of your soul.
Yeah.
When you leave that setting, you just don't go on to do something else easily. The Air Force wanted me to stay in and go to Washington. I couldn't push papers, so I retired instead. Then I went through a period of time where I ran away from healthcare.
You did?
I worked in the engineering industry for 5 years, and ran a small company. And it was interesting to build a company, but it didn't have a purpose. I missed a purpose during that time. And then consulting again, and the VA for a short time when they were in trouble, I still missed this purpose because it was always resonating in the back of my mind. Healthcare has a higher calling.
It does.
It always does. So just recently, through some various changes and these various ways you take in life, I really sat down and looked in the mirror and said, what is it that I'm about? What is it I care about? Well, I reflected back on the time when I was proudest of myself. It was during that time. The lessons I learned in life during that time highlighted to me, oh my gosh, that was the essence of healthcare. And we kind of miss that in today's society. We miss it in the U.S., I can tell you, because it's such a business. Business has sort of perversed it into something that it shouldn't be today, in my mind. We do great things here technically, but we've missed this what I call this calling of care that I felt we had there. I didn't have policies. I didn't have administration. I didn't have access to care. I didn't have a budget. I didn't even have attorneys. We just saved lives. And so I call this ugly, elegant lesson in my life. That's where I learned what care is really about. So how do we kind of bottle that and put that as a portion of the way we look at our future healthcare in this nation? That's really kind of what I'm trying to do now.
You are doing it.
I'm trying to do it through speaking, trying to do it through my teaching, and a little bit through consulting, but I want people to really understand why they're here.
Stay on that for a minute, because there are a lot of listeners, I'm sure, today who either are in some aspect of healthcare or are considering it or have family or friends who are in it. What would you say to listeners today? Why would you get into healthcare, or why would you stay in it, or should you?
Well, you have to really reflect and say, why am I here? If you're here to make money, you need to go do something else. I challenge my audiences sometimes. If you can't walk down to the waiting room once a week, talk to a patient, talk to their family, understand their story, and if you aren't emotionally moved by that, you need to quit. You need to leave. I used to, back when we had nurseries in the hospitals I worked at, I would go visit babies. Because it sort of renewed to me about this purpose of why we're here and how healthcare is about helping. It's about caring. And caring for not only the patients we serve, but caring for the people who choose to serve them. And we've lost that as well. We've become quite a bureaucratic business that is so complicated and so convoluted now. We've lost this calling. We've lost this higher level of care, as I call it today. And that's what I think we need to rediscover before we can make the right decisions in the future of healthcare.
You know, Don, thank goodness the few hospital stays I've had or operations that I've had to go through, thank goodness as you're talking, I look back and I really relate to exactly what you said about that a young man on the cot and looks up, and that person, that medic, is the most important person in their life. And just here in the United States, I very clearly remember waking up and whoever was in front of me that was taking care of me was the most important person. Gratefully, so far, I've had really caring people. But I love what you said before the show about caring. You say it, 2, 4, and how do you say your mantra?
Yeah, I learned through, and when I do my speeches, I talk about we had a calling to care for those in need, and I learned that in Iraq. And then I talk about the emerging disruptors in healthcare, and all of the things that are changing in our nation, and we're screaming as a nation to create care. I call it calling for care. We want to create care in our nation, and we have no idea how to navigate the process that we're in, because we're locked in a business and we're trying to create a calling. And we're stuck there, and a lot of our people are. And then the last is the leadership needs to care to do this.
To care.
The calling to care. And if you're not a leader that cares, you need to follow this calling to care, and that is for those we serve and for those who serve them. It's essential. And so you have to find parts of that message in your heart and your mind and carry that forward. The business is necessary. I'm not naive. The business is the means, though, to deliver the care. It's the means to the end. It's not the end. And I think we've confused that over time.
Interesting. What are we doing well in healthcare?
What are we doing well? Technically, we're very good in research. And technically, we train great physicians and nurses. Technically, we're good at healthcare. It's just how it's applied now is where our challenge is.
Those are good statements, Don. All the things about leadership that you learned in the Air Force and certainly at your time in Balad. Now, when you are going into organizations, from a leadership standpoint, can you relate some of the leadership lessons that you're now taking into your consulting work?
Sure. Healthcare to me is a unique leadership opportunity. And sometimes leaders in healthcare arrive by what I call technical means, by education and by prior status.
Sure.
It really sometimes they don't have what I call the necessary journey steps and life lessons to handle the complexities of leading in a unique environment. So some of those are, you can't be, you got to share. You have to have an open heart. And I talk about this, that's part of the caring side. Leadership in healthcare requires an open heart, again, to everyone, and that has to be known. You have to share that why with those you lead. They need to know you're genuine, you're authentic. One of the things that's resonated of late is setting standards. One of the things I learned from Iraq, my first week there, we had a mass casualty with a lot of casualties coming in on a Saturday evening. And my chief nurse brought me a hypodermic needle that was used for morphine that had been found out by the restrooms.
Oh.
And she said, I think we may have a problem. And I said, Frank, thanks for bringing it to me. Yes, we either have misuse of narcotics or we have a user.
Oh.
And I can't tolerate either. These kids deserve more.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the only complete drug screen for all 400 folks on a Saturday night.
400?
I did. They all donated. Right behind me, I was the first to give the sample. And I did a drug screen. But a couple of things that set the standard is there would be, under my leadership, there would never be a compromise. Care was paramount. There were no individuals here. We were a team. So I set the standard of, you are expected to adhere to policies. And the expectation was, you're going to comply. This is no nonsense. It's a serious business, and we're here to save lives. That's all there is to it. Well, that resonated very well, actually, with the team. I was surprised at that. And the other lesson I learned is that sometimes these emerging generations love standards.
Yes,
They love to know where the curbs are on the streets.
Sure, boundaries.
And they knew there were standards now. And they felt comfortable within that. And it allowed a level of safety that they wasn't sure they would have.
Well, that certainly relates to any business that you go into, doesn't it, Don? What are you enjoying most now in what you're doing? Coming from that kind of a background to
right now, what I enjoy most, right now, I love to help people find their own way. Some of the leaders in healthcare right now are struggling with all of the pressures to achieve bottom line, return on investment issues. I keep asking about when are we going to start measuring the return on health?
Yes.
When are we going to have a return on caring? When are we going to look at other things of value in healthcare besides just the bottom line? And we have a challenge with the nation as who we serve. So what I enjoy, I think I enjoy helping change the discussion. I want the discussion to be different. I don't want it to be political. This isn't political. This is too important to be political.
Good point.
It's too important to be business. This is about caring for each other. Now we define who that is. That's the tough call because we can't afford to care for the world. But we can do what we need to do for those that have earned it. And we need to make that decision. Then we have to put a focus on what health really is. Massive discussion about, is it a right or is it a business? Well, that is a valid discussion. I won't share an opinion here, but I think people have a right to health. Now, health care is a different story, but people have to have a responsibility for their own health as well. And we need to find a way to encourage that in this nation, unlike other nations who do that very well. We don't.
So, I can well understand, going into companies myself and training programs, that you are so well equipped and so blessed. Our country is blessed to have you be so well equipped to come in and not only share inspiration, which you've done today, Don, but also the practical things, what you experienced in all of your background, even before going to Iraq.
Right.
You're well suited to go in and help any organization, I'm sure, with processes and innovation and all the aspects that you did. By the way, listeners, if you are wanting to look at some videos about what happened with Bob Woodruff and Doug Vaught, you can check out, where is it, Anna?
It's already on Facebook and on the YouTube chat box.
Yeah, and find out more about that. They did both come back. Thank God they're living and doing as well as they can, and are on to doing amazing things themselves. So I'd encourage you for that. The other thing I wanted to say is that when you think about just the mass industry of healthcare, there's so much to it. And yes, it is a business, as many things are. But leave one more thing with us about purpose. You found your purpose. You said it became a calling.
Right.
What about people, particularly in healthcare, that aren't quite sure if that's the direction or not? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. I have been coaching an organization, a healthcare organization, that is working with doctors to learn how to coach when these young men and women are considering becoming a doctor, and they are in the process of doing so. And in that coaching assignment, what I've listened to are young people who are still questioning, is this for me? They think it is. They're in the midst of it. What would you say to them?
First of all, you have to take a look at their own history themselves. They have to understand how they were developed. Where's their heart and their mindset?
Okay.
Because to do healthcare right, you really have to have empathy. You have to be a compassionate heart. You have to be a compassionate person with a heart that wants to serve and give. If you're here, the technical challenges, yes, there's a place in healthcare for you to do research where you're not, at that point of care with a patient or with a family. But you have to really reflect deep. Am I able to convey messages of hope and messages of happiness throughout my career? And can I stay engaged in that? You also have to accept the fact that you must learn always. And you can learn from other than physicians. Others can teach you many things. And you have to be open to that. And the other part is, if you're in it for the money, don't do it. That's the wrong reason.
We need you for all those right reasons. One final question. So what happened now? What is going on at the hospital? We turned it back, I know, to the Iraqi people. So
we did.
Any update on?
No.
On that?
Of course, we're out of the country now by and large with a few contractors there. The Air Force still supports a joint medical center in Afghanistan now, and it's still serving those that are still remaining in country and doing quite well. Friends still rotate through. We've been doing this for many number of years. They step up to the plate and they respectfully serve their time and do it quite well. And I'm very proud of them. Very proud of them. Very proud of the team. Very proud of those who preceded me, those I still work with, and those that I still have great friendships with. Just had a chat with a nurse who served with me there just this last Saturday.
Did you?
Yeah, we caught up just on
That's fun.
where life is.
That's fun.
And she's done great. So thank you.
Don, thank you. Thank you for being on the show and sharing so many interesting things that, how would you know some of these things behind the scene? And you certainly are doing it right. I want to congratulate you, especially on this week of July 4th.
Great. Thank you for your time today.
You're so welcome. Okay. And thank you, our listeners, for being with us today. I want to also say again, thank you, Betty Ritter, this wonderful boutique, for my yellow rose outfit today. Be sure when you listen and watch this on YouTube or listen on any of the podcast channels, be sure that you share and that you subscribe. We are watching all the analytics. We appreciate every single one of you who take the time to listen to this 30-minute show with wonderful guests like Don today. Until next time, stay authentic, be real, get your purpose, really reflect on your purpose. It makes such a difference. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, valerieandcompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.